The Galactic Council's Central Assembly Chamber was a masterpiece of ego. Golden spires floated mid-air, pulsating with synthetic gravity fields, while crystalline panels shimmered with holographic status feeds from every corner of the known universe. Above it all, the emblem of unity glowed, a swirling helix of every member species' DNA, except Earth's, of course. That had become something of a running joke. Zakarn of the High Mind levitated near the central dais, his bioluminescent tentacles adjusting his ceremonial robes with an air of perpetual smugness. He tilted his bulbous head toward the assembly. Let the meeting on the Earth petition commence. Prepare yourselves for comedy. A ripple of amusement spread through the chamber. The Vrox delegate, a gelatinous mass with eyes floating independently like lazy planets, burbled in agreement. Primitive mammals. Barely out of their mud huts. Hardly worth our attention, sneered Nyashi of the Kivari, a bird-like creature with feathers preened to a razor's edge. She clicked her beak disdainfully. They glorify conflict. They still burn fossil fuels. From the far end of the chamber, Wugthan the Devourer shifted on his 6 armored legs. His mandibles snapped with impatience. Let them fight. Their extinction will be swift and entertaining. Silence fell as the doors hissed open, revealing the Earth delegation. 2 humans stepped in. One wore the dark, crisp uniform of a military attaché, the other a khaki suit with a bolo tie, and a wide, friendly grin that seemed stuck in perpetual howdy mode. The latter stepped forward with a casual wave, balancing a white styrofoam cup that suspiciously steamed with something aromatic. Ladies, gents, and, well, however y'all identify, he drawled with a warmth that seemed too sincere. Ambassador Jack Simmons, Earth representative. Mighty pleased to be here. The council stared. Jack didn't seem to notice or mind. He walked to the center, nodded politely to a floating eye cluster, and set his coffee on the transparent podium. His voice was honey-smooth, with a layer of baked-in American hospitality that made it hard to tell if he was complimenting you or setting you up for a bar fight. Zakarn's voice boomed telepathically into everyone's minds. Ambassador Simmons. Earth's application has been reviewed. It is amusing. Jack smiled wider. Well now, we do aim to entertain. A few chuckles, mostly nervous. Nyashi blinked rapidly, feathers twitching. Your people claim technological parity. Yet your recorded arsenal includes combustion-driven vehicles, chemical propellants, and kinetic weapons. Wheels, Ambassador. You still use wheels. Jack took a sip from his cup and set it down with a deliberate clink. Sure do. Best way to move a barbecue across uneven terrain, wouldn't y'all say? More laughter. This time with a hint of discomfort. Your military vessels lack biological integration, Zakarn continued, tone tightening. Your neural networks are manual. Inefficient. You still send beings into battlefields. Jack nodded slowly, as if agreeing with a disappointing weather report. We do have drones though. But sometimes you just need a boots-on-the-ground kinda touch. Ain't nothing like a personal visit to drive a point home. Nyashi twitched. I believe that is the concern. Your civilization appears to relish war. To celebrate chaos. Jack set his hands on the podium, leaning in slightly. Now, I wouldn't say we celebrate war. More like, we're real good at remembering who started it. Zakarn pulsed a sickly red. Earth's membership is rejected. By unanimous vote. Jack didn't flinch. Just leaned back and chuckled. Well shoot, and here I thought y'all were an inclusive bunch. Wugthan's voice buzzed through his mandibles. You've brought nothing to this council but noise. And, what is that? He pointed one claw at the hulking crate behind the human delegation. Several meters long, matte black, sealed with a locking interface. Jack turned. That's our peace offering. A demonstration model. Nyashi scoffed. You brought a weapon into the council? Jack tapped the crate affectionately. We figured words might not do it justice. Thought y'all might like a hands-on demonstration of what we call restraint. The silence that followed felt engineered. Zakarn's tendrils trembled. You expect us to entertain this barbarity? Entertain? No sir. Just figured y'all might like to understand why we fight the way we do. Seems y'all been getting the wrong impression, and Earth ain't much for being misunderstood. Nyashi adjusted her wing feathers, posture rigid. You believe you can intimidate this council? Jack grinned. Oh no. We just believe in showin', not tellin'. We're old school like that. Rick T.I., a reptilian elder who had remained silent until now, stirred in his seat. His voice was a slow hiss. Why now? Why reveal yourselves like this? Jack's expression softened, just a little. Because we've been listenin'. Watchin'. You see, we knew the moment we asked to join, y'all would laugh. That was part of the bet. Zakarn narrowed his glow. Bet? Jack spread his arms. Y'all ever play poker? The question hung unanswered. Jack didn't expect a reply. We've been losin' deliberately. Sending y'all intercepted footage of outdated tech. Leakin' our worst data. Letting you think we were slow, backward, disorganized. Because that's how you treat your inferiors. With arrogance. With overconfidence. Nyashi stood. You admit deception? Darn right. See, humans, we're apex predators with anxiety. We don't want to fight. We just want folks to leave us alone. But you start sniffing around our backyard, laughing at our slingshots? We start loading the real ones. Jack stepped back as the crate clicked open. Gears hissed. Fog hissed out. A shape emerged, hulking, angular, painted in dull desert tan. The M1 Abrams rolled forward an inch, its engine purring with life, its cannon eyeing the chamber like a lazy giant just waking up. The council erupted. Some delegates screamed in 17 dialects. Security fields flared to life. Wugthan lunged forward, but was held back by a magnetic restraint field that someone, probably Earth, had activated remotely. Jack held up his palms. Easy now. She ain't loaded. Mostly. Call her a conversation starter. Rick T.I. leaned in. You brought a tank to a diplomatic meeting. Jack shrugged. Y'all brought condescension to a species that sharpened sticks just to fight each other over imaginary lines. Potato. Potato. Zakarn snarled in the minds of everyone present. This is a threat. Jack smiled. No, Zarny boy. This is a courtesy. A preview. If this here was a threat, we wouldn't be talkin'. You'd already be scrap metal and regrets. Wugthan roared. I challenge this machine. My mech will obliterate it. Now. Jack looked at his attaché, a stern woman who had said nothing so far. She nodded. He turned back. Then let's dance. The crate resealed behind them as the humans prepared to move the tank to the nearby simulation chamber. The council buzzed with uneasy energy. Accusations flew. Some demanded Earth's immediate sanction. Others watched the humans with a new, cold silence. Nyashi turned to Rick T.I. They're insane. Rick T.I., ever the quiet observer, watched Jack's retreating back. No. They're hunters. And they've just entered the forest. As Jack and his team guided the tank through the corridor, a young aide whispered. Was that wise, sir? The tank, the threats. Jack took a long sip of his coffee. Son, when someone laughs at your teeth, sometimes you gotta let him hear you growl. Just a little. The aide hesitated. And if they retaliate? Jack didn't break stride. Then we stop smilin'. In the chamber behind them, Zakarn stared at the empty crate. The humans had been underestimated, laughed at, written off. But now? Now they had everyone's attention. And Jack Simmons was counting on that. The simulation chamber doors hissed closed, sealing behind the tank and its grinning escort. The clunk of its treads echoed long after they were gone. The game had begun. The simulation chamber was anything but primitive. Suspended in orbit above the Council's central world, the arena was a technological marvel. Adaptive terrain fields, climate manipulators, gravity flux adjusters, and full biometric sensors. Originally built for interspecies military exhibitions and diplomatic war games, it had seen every form of strategy from psychic warfare to thermoplasmic osmosis duels. But never before had it hosted anything like an M1 Abrams. The tank rolled onto the platform with a low growl, its engine settling into a steady hum that sounded almost like it was purring. The alien audience watched from behind the force fields, arranged in tiered observation spheres floating above the arena's edge. Council guards, clad in shimmering armor woven from compressed neutron thread, stood uneasily with their weapons drawn. But no one was foolish enough to fire first. Ambassador Jack Simmons stood beside the tank, hands in his pockets, as his team performed a final check. Lieutenant Madison Young, Earth's military attaché and certified war mechanic, was calibrating the tank's sensory feedback to sync with the simulation's combat parameters. "You good?" she asked, not looking up. Jack nodded. "She's got her boots on, coffee in her cup, and a belly full of diesel. She's ready." Across the arena, the challenge was being assembled. Wugthin the Devourer's personal combat rig, a towering bipedal mech standing twice the height of the M1, stomped onto the field. A marvel of Krask engineering, it bristled with plasma weapons, spinning talon discs, and a thermal lance that could melt through asteroids. Its legs hissed with compressed gas hydraulics as it struck a pose meant to intimidate. Inside the pilot chamber, Wugthin grinned. His mandibles clicked in excitement. "Let the mammals witness evolution," he growled into the broadcast. Jack turned to the Council's floating adjudicator node, a spherical drone with a neutral voice. "Ground rules. No lethal strikes. No orbital weapons. Combat ends when one combatant is rendered incapacitated or retreats." Jack gave a thumbs up. Fair as Sunday church. Young climbed into the Abrams and began the startup sequence. Panels lit up. She flipped a switch. The tank let out a satisfied mechanical rumble. The 120mm smoothbore cannon adjusted slightly, as if sniffing the air. Wugthin's mech raised a plasma cannon the size of a bus. The countdown began. 3. Jack leaned against the railing, watching with unshakable calm. 2. Yang's voice crackled through the external speakers. "Let's give him a good show, baby." 1. Silence. Then, chaos. Wugthin's mech opened fire, loosing a barrage of plasma pulses that scorched the arena's floor. The M1 Abrams was already in motion, moving in a wide arc. Despite its weight, it glided with terrifying smoothness, treads devouring the ground beneath it. One pulse struck the edge of the tank's hull, exploding in a flash, but the armor held. Yang didn't respond with fire. Not yet. Instead, she maneuvered the tank behind a terrain rise generated by the Sim's environment control. The mech followed, stomping forward and firing in rhythm. Inside the observation chamber, murmurs rippled through the council. Zakarn's tendrils curled in irritation. "They're hiding." Rick Ti watched silently. His eyes, ancient and wise, narrowed slightly. Nyashi scoffed. What could they possibly hope to accomplish with that primitive machine? Then the Abrams fired. The cannon blast was thunderous even inside the simulated chamber. A high-velocity shell ripped through the air, slamming into the mech's right leg with pinpoint precision. Metal screamed. Wugthin snarled as his rig stumbled, servos stuttering. The second shot came faster. Another shell struck the mech's left knee joint. The massive war machine buckled, stumbling backward. It wasn't destroyed, far from it, but its balance was compromised. Sparks burst from exposed wiring. Yang's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Guess y'all forgot, this ain't a duel. It's a hunt." The tank moved again, sliding across the arena with tactical grace. It vanished behind another terrain morph, reappearing behind the mech's flank. The cannon fired once more, this time at the back armor plate. The blast didn't penetrate, but it knocked the mech forward. Wugthin barely recovered in time to launch a retaliatory barrage, but the tank had already moved. Zakarn was no longer amused. That machine's speed defies its mass profile. Nyashi checked the readings. Impossible. It's adapting to our simulation. It's learning. Jack sipped from his ever-present coffee. She's got a good driver. Wugthin roared inside his cockpit. Enough. His mech activated all weapon systems at once. A series of plasma mortars erupted from the shoulders. Micromissiles locked on to thermal signatures. The arena glowed with deadly energy. Jack watched the display. He's panicking. Yang remained calm. She cut power briefly, masking the heat signature, then activated countermeasures. The tank's reactive armor absorbed smaller impacts, flares misdirected the missiles, and then, she struck again. One last shell. This time, aimed directly at the mech's plasma core housing, buried just beneath its upper shoulder plating. The blast ripped through the mech's torso. Energy flared, then shorted. The mech toppled, groaning under its own weight as backup systems failed. Silence. The adjudicator drone floated forward. Victory. Human combatant. Enemy incapacitated. The chamber was dead quiet. Wugthan emerged from the wreckage, growling, his pride visibly bruised. Jack met his eyes through the observation glass and gave a polite nod. Nice dance, Bugman. Nyashi's feathers were standing on end. That shouldn't have been possible. That vehicle is centuries behind us. Jack exhaled slowly, letting the silence linger. Rick Ti's voice broke it. It was not the vehicle. Zakarn turned to him. Explain. Rick Ti's gaze was steady. It was the mind behind it. The strategy. The restraint. They never intended to destroy him, only to disable him. Humiliate him. Jack stepped into the center of the chamber as the tank was hauled back. We designed the Abrams during an age of resource wars, he said aloud. Built to survive the worst terrain, the worst odds, and the worst politics. It wasn't meant to be elegant. It was meant to win. Zakarn's tendrils flared with irritation. This display was meant to intimidate. A primitive flex of force. Jack turned toward him, still smiling, but something sharper glinted beneath his friendly tone. No, sir. This display was a reply. Y'all laughed at our arsenal. You saw our tanks, our guns, our boots, and thought you saw the whole picture. But you weren't looking at the hands behind the tools. Nyashi bristled. And what are we looking at now? Jack folded his arms. A species that never stopped fighting. We fought each other for millennia. Over dirt. Over gods. Over ideas. We got real good at it. Then we figured out how to stop. But we never forgot how. He stepped forward. We didn't come here for your approval. We came here to see if you deserved ours. The chamber rippled with discomfort. Zakarn hissed. You dare speak in such arrogance? Jack's expression didn't change. I speak in memory. Y'all keep talking about our wars. Our chaos. But none of you stopped to ask how we survived it. How we came out the other side. Rick Ti stood. All eyes turned to him. They came out with a purpose. Zakarn sneered. They came out as monsters. No, Rick Ti corrected. They came out as monsters tamed. And that is far more dangerous. The chamber shook as the doors opened again. More human delegates filed in. Not diplomats, military officers, engineers, scientists. Behind them, a holographic display lit up, showing Earth's orbital fleet. A low voice from Jack. That tank? That was a letter of intent. Zakarn pulsed. You mean to start a war? Jack met his glow dead on. No, sir. We mean to stop one before it starts. The room bristled with tension. Because here's the thing, Jack continued. We've been watching. We know about your exploitation protocols. Your pacification efforts. The way you quietly bleed primitive planets dry while wagging your finger at others. You think we didn't notice? We saw the pattern. We let you think we didn't. Nyashi's eyes narrowed. This was all planned. Jack didn't blink. We ain't just soldiers. We're storytellers. Strategists. You judged us on our tools. You should have judged us on our patience. Wugthan, bruised and limping, barked out. Why reveal yourselves now? Jack exhaled. Because the time's right. Because now, everyone's watching. And we want the galaxy to hear the same thing. He tapped the glass. Earth is here. We don't want war. But we don't run from it either. We specialize in what happens when someone else starts it. Rick Ti looked around. What happens next? Jack gave a smile so charming it was practically criminal. Y'all invite us to the next council meeting. Zakarn spat psychic bile. Never. Jack shrugged. Well then, I guess we just sit outside. Watch. Wait. And every time a planet gets stripped, every time a freighter vanishes, every time a system gets stabilized, we'll be there. Making friends. Taking notes. He started walking out. Young joined him, her uniform scuffed, her expression calm. Are we just going to walk away? She asked softly. Jack glanced back. We already walked in. Now we let him stew. Nyashi's voice rang out. You think this show makes you powerful? Jack stopped. Turned. No, he said simply. It just reminded y'all we're here. And maybe, just maybe, not to poke the bear. With that, he tipped his imaginary hat and exited the arena. Behind him, the council buzzed with fevered debate, but the illusion had shattered. The humans weren't a backward anomaly. They weren't a joke. They were a warning. And the tank had been their opening statement. The council chambers had not been this quiet in centuries. What had begun as a performance, a quaint cultural indulgence for an inferior species, had evolved into a grim meditation on miscalculation. Most of the counselors had sat in their thrones of prestige and tradition, confident in their superiority, only to watch that confidence cracked open by the roar of a tank engine and the precision of human restraint. Now, the aftermath left them adrift. Zakarn of the high mind floated lower than usual, his tendrils tight against his form. His internal comms pulsed with sub-channel debates among his kin. None had predicted this. Not the psychics, not the tacticians, not the centuries-old seers whose entire purpose was to chart the development of emerging civilizations. The humans were not just further along than expected. They had chosen to appear less evolved. Deception as strategy. Weaponized perception. Nyashi, typically composed and haughty, found herself tapping one talon against her console, feathers twitching involuntarily. Her race was known for battlefield cunning, having outwitted armadas with elegant feints and precision diplomacy. But what Earth had demonstrated was something different. Something primal, raw, and terrifyingly elegant. Not brute strength. Not numbers. But theater. Calculated chaos, wrapped in humor and politeness. They hadn't just fought to win. They'd staged the entire conflict for effect. At the center of this gathering storm sat Jack Simmons, once again sipping from his coffee cup like nothing had happened. You know, he mused aloud, voice lazy as a summer afternoon, I'm real fond of y'all's hospitality. The lights, the chairs that float, all very classy. But I do gotta ask, does this place have a back door? 'Cause things are about to get real noisy out front. No one responded. Then the alarms sounded. Not the shrill, predictable blare of a localized security alert. This was deeper. Lower. The kind of sound systems made when they didn't just detect danger. They recognized something they were never designed to confront. Every screen in the chamber flared with red glyphs and scrolling data. Defense networks were pinging an unscheduled arrival. Unidentified vessels had dropped out of faster-than-light near the Galactic core, a zone restricted to council members only. A dozen ships, then 2 dozen. Human transponder codes. Not military, not exploratory. Just parked. They hadn't even activated shields. Zakarn's voice boomed across the chamber, laced with psychic static. What is the meaning of this? Jack tilted his head. I reckon it means the cavalry showed up. You violated core space neutrality, Nyashi said, wings partially unfurled in alarm. That's an act of war. Jack gave her a long, slow blink. War? Nah. We're just spectatin'. Figured since we're not members, we ought to stay outside the clubhouse. But y'all got some real pretty stars out there. Would be a shame if someone tried to take him from you and we had to step in, unofficially. Nyashi's voice dropped. Are you threatening us? He smiled. No ma'am. Just admirin' the view. Though I would suggest checking your defense grid logs from, say 2 years ago. You might find a few inconsistencies. Rick T.I., quiet until now, reached forward and pulled up the archives. His claws moved fast, bypassing standard encryption. As he accessed deeper logs, the others watched in silence. The data was unambiguous. There had been tampering, stealth incursions, surveillance threads so subtle, they were invisible to every standard scan. Jack watched the realization unfold like a sunrise. Yeah, we've been here a while. Y'all just weren't looking the right way. Zakarin leaned forward. For what purpose? Surveillance? Espionage? You dare insinuate infiltration of the council itself? Jack's eyes were unreadable. You see, back home we got this saying. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. But y'all brought smugness to a chess match. Young appeared beside him, carrying a small device with a live tactical overlay. We've mapped 87% of the Council's secure systems, observed troop deployments, analyzed fleet movement patterns. We've seen everything. The chamber erupted in a dozen overlapping voices. This is a breach of interstellar law. Unprovoked aggression. Spying on sovereign nations. Jack raised one hand, palm out, and the noise died down. Let me clear something up, he said. We didn't come here to attack. We came to see. To make sure what we'd heard was true. And sadly it was. He turned toward the central display, which now showed images from human reconnaissance. Dead moons stripped of resources. Civilizations bombed back into the Stone Age under the guise of uplift assistance. Council-authorized exterminations justified as containment of cultural volatility. Young spoke next. You claim to be guardians of peace. But what you are is a cartel. A bureaucratic engine that consumes the innocent and punishes dissent. You misjudged us because we didn't hide our flaws. Because we wear our madness on our sleeves. Jack added. You thought that made us weak. But weakness ain't honesty. And violence, when it's all dressed up nice, is still violence. Nyashi stared at the images, her posture still but tense. You planned this entire thing. The application. The mockery. The demonstration. You wanted this meeting to happen. Guilty, Jack admitted cheerfully. You gotta understand, back home, we don't invade unless there's a party invitation. But if someone's been bullying the neighborhood kids, sometimes we show up early. With pie. And tanks. Zakarin's mental presence spiked. You used deception. Lies. You manipulated us into underestimating you. Jack's grin didn't falter. Only because it worked. The chamber sat in stunned silence as the human fleet continued to idle in orbit. They hadn't fired. Hadn't demanded surrender. But every second they remained, they demonstrated the one thing that terrified the Council most. Intentional control. No bloodshed. Just presence. Not conquest. Just position. The weight of that restraint was heavier than any invasion. Rick Ti spoke at last. What is it you want? Yang leaned in, calm and precise. Transparency. Reform. An end to Council interventions disguised as aid. A seat at the table not because we're asking, but because we're watching. Zakarin's tendrils lashed outward. And if we refuse? Jack's eyes hardened for the first time. The mask of southern charm didn't drop, but something darker simmered behind it. If y'all refuse, he said quietly, then we start showing people what you've really been up to. We know the species you disappeared. The uprisings you erased. The planets you sterilized. We didn't just come here with threats. We came with evidence. Nyashi studied him. And if we agree? Jack shrugged. Then maybe y'all get to keep that fancy council emblem. Maybe this whole thing ends with a handshake instead of a history lesson in fire. Zakarin turned to the others, desperate for unity, for defiance. But he found only silence. Even Wugthan, battered and humiliated, had withdrawn to a corner, no longer the voice of brute bravado. Rick Ti spoke slowly. They have not destroyed us, though they could. They have not demanded surrender, though they could. They offer truth and a mirror. He turned to face Jack. You've set a trap with no teeth. A revolution of eyes and minds. Clever. Jack gave a small bow. Well, sir, we figured that was the only kind that lasts. Young added. You can fire a shot and win a battle. Or you can plant doubt and win a generation. Zakarn hissed. This is blackmail. No, Jack said. This is us giving you a choice. The council remained in session for hours afterward, debating behind closed shields. Jack and Yang remained on standby, drinking coffee, reviewing orbital telemetry, and occasionally playing chess on a tablet Jack pulled from his jacket. Eventually, the chamber reopened. The verdict came with no ceremony. Earth would be granted provisional admission. A joint commission would be established to review past council interventions. The human fleet would remain in orbit, not as a threat, but as observers. Jack stood, stretching his back with a satisfied sigh. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit. That went smoother than I expected. Yang arched a brow. You thought they'd fold? Jack smirked. I thought they'd fight harder. But fear'll do strange things to the mighty. He turned back one last time, facing the chamber full of watching eyes and simmering minds. Y'all remember this, he said. We're not the heroes. We're not the villains. We're just the folks who showed up when you thought nobody was watching. And that tank? That wasn't a message. That was a punctuation mark. As they walked out of the chamber, the screens behind them flickered. The human fleet, still idle, shifted formation. Not a weapon fired. Not a single shot. But the shape they took formed a single word in Council standard glyphs. Seen. And for the first time in its long, illustrious, and corrupted history, the Galactic Council didn't know whether it was being offered peace or being warned never to test humanity's patience again. The hallways of the Galactic Council had never felt so empty, even as thousands of delegates and attendants scurried through them. Something had shifted. Not a storm, but the silence before one. Conversations dropped to whispers when human boots echoed down the corridors. The same diplomats who'd once mocked Earth now avoided eye contact or forced smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. The humans, to their credit, didn't gloat. They didn't need to. Jack Simmons walked with a slow, confident stride, his usual coffee cup replaced with a flask, an informal touch in an otherwise rigid world. Beside him, Lieutenant Yang carried a small, silver case etched with the Earth Federation insignia. They weren't headed to another demonstration, nor a formal vote. They were on their way to a closed-door council with the Inner Circle, the ruling tier of the council that rarely met face-to-face unless the galaxy was on fire. This time, it was smoldering. They were escorted by two council guards who, while expressionless, had the unmistakable stiffness of beings acutely aware they were leading wolves into the sheepfold. The path led them deep into the core of the Citadel, where diplomatic niceties gave way to tactical chambers, war maps, and fortified deliberation halls. It was not a place humans had ever been invited. Jack raised an eyebrow at Yang. You notice they didn't ask us to dress formal? She gave a small nod. Either a sign of trust, or they think we're about to get our hands dirty. Could be both, he murmured. When the doors slid open, the room was already half filled with figures who radiated authority. Zakarn hovered above a circle of advisors, tendrils dimmer than before. Nyashi sat tall but still, her feathers subdued, talons gripping her chair in a way that betrayed stress. Wugthan, bandaged and quieter than ever, loomed in his reinforced chair, his previous bloodlust now replaced with something more watchful. Rick Ti was last to arrive, his gaze tired but focused. A single seat had been added to the center, clearly for Jack. Not a throne, not a trap, just a chair. Functional. Human-sized. Jack sat without hesitation. Yang remained standing, her hands resting on the case. Zakarn's voice crackled into the room without the usual pomp. This is not a council vote. This is not a hearing. This is a reckoning. And you are here because none of us can afford ignorance anymore. Jack didn't smile. He nodded once. Then let's reckon. A silence passed. Nyashi spoke first. You've made your point. Earth is not to be underestimated. You've demonstrated control, intelligence, strategic foresight, and discipline. What we don't understand is, why? Jack took a breath. Because we've seen what happens when power's left unchallenged. When people start thinking they're the top of the ladder just because no one's looked them in the eye lately. He glanced around the room. We didn't want to come in like this. Hell, we tried the polite route. Sent our best thinkers, best diplomats. Got laughed out of orbit. Called apes. Called warmongers. But we ain't ashamed of where we come from. Zakarn interjected, his voice heavy. You expect us to believe this wasn't vengeance? No, Young said firmly. This wasn't revenge. It was clarity. You mocked us because you thought peace meant weakness. But for us, peace is something we have to work for, every damn day. We don't come from a utopia. We come from struggle. And we figured, if we're gonna deal with a galaxy full of empires, we'd better bring that struggle with us, on our terms. Nyashi's eyes narrowed. And what are your terms now? Jack opened his palm slowly, like revealing cards at the final play of a long game. Balance. Transparency. And this. Young stepped forward and opened the silver case. Inside was a sleek data rod, pulsing with quiet light. Jack gestured to it. A complete archive of every covert operation the Council authorized over the last 100 years. We recorded it. Backdoors, intercepted comms, internal Council memos. All verified. All time-stamped. Shock rippled through the room. Wugthan's mandibles twitched. You spied on us even then? Jack's gaze was steady. No. We prepared. In case y'all ever turned those eyes on us. Rick T.I. rose slowly. And what do you plan to do with this information? Nothing, Jack said. Unless we're forced to. Nyashi tilted her head. You're leveraging it. Damn right, Jack replied. Leverage is the only diplomacy y'all seem to respect. We show goodwill, we get called quaint. We show power, we get called a threat. So fine, we'll be a threat worth respecting. Zakarn's voice dropped to a whisper. You want the galaxy to fear Earth? No, Jack said, his voice suddenly cold, stripped of humor. We want the galaxy to understand what happens when fear is mistaken for superiority. The room went silent again. Then Rick T.I., with a voice like cracked stone, said, And what happens now? Young closed the case and stepped back. Now, you decide. Accept oversight. Admit the truth of what the Council has done. Let Earth have a seat where we can see the books, hear the voices, vote on the paths that shape trillions of lives. Or don't. And we start releasing the files. Not to threaten, but to educate. Wugthan let out a low, rasping sound. Laughter, maybe. Or something like it. You're not diplomats. You're strategists wearing smiles. Jack finally smiled again, but there was no warmth in it. We're humans. That means we're both. Zakarn's color shifted, slow and dim. And what of your fleet? Jack stood. They stay. For now. Like bouncers at the door of a party they weren't invited to. If things go well, maybe we bring snacks next time. The metaphor did little to calm the tension, but something in the room began to settle. An acceptance. Not of peace, not yet, but of position. Of understanding that the board had changed and Earth, once considered the pawn, had just taken the queen with a well-timed smile. Rick T.I., ever the quiet judge, gave a nod. We will hold a full council vote in 48 hours. Until then, your presence is conditional but acknowledged. Jack tipped an invisible hat. Appreciate the hospitality. As they exited the chamber, Yang glanced over. You think they'll vote yes? Jack's reply was grim. I think they'll vote for survival. Whether that includes truth or just quiet submission, that's still up in the air. Back aboard the human command vessel orbiting the core, the view of the Citadel shimmered like a floating cathedral surrounded by the disciplined precision of the human fleet. Dozens of ships, perfectly still, silently monitored the horizon like sentinels out of myth. Inside the flagship's observation deck, Jack stood alone for a long moment. Then the console chimed. Encrypted channel. Unknown source. He answered. Zakarn's voice emerged. Your tactics were effective. Ruthless, calculated, efficient. Jack didn't reply. After a beat, Zakarn added. You may be the most dangerous species we've ever encountered. Jack finally spoke. "We might be. But we're also the one species who'll tell you that to your face and offer you a drink after." He ended the call. A few hours later, a single data packet pulsed through the Council's core network. An emergency vote. No press. No ceremony. Just a line of code blinking for every delegate. Motion. Grant Earth full member status under provisional oversight, with immediate effect. Jack watched from orbit as the final votes lit green. Unanimous. Yang entered the deck, reading the confirmation. "It's done," she said. Jack nodded, his voice quiet. "No. It started." The humans hadn't won a war. They'd redefined the rules of one. They didn't need to conquer anyone. They just needed the galaxy to understand. Earth had arrived. And they were watching. The stars would never feel as distant again.